When the storm destroys everything you love, what keeps you alive? Hope or love itself? After the Storm tells the haunting yet beautiful journey of Tieu, a young woman searching for Truong, the man she loves, after a devastating typhoon tears through their village. Through hunger, despair, and heartbreak, she never stops believing he's still out there. But just when she's about to give up, a single phone call changes everything. Will she find him alive? Subscribe now and follow Tieu's emotional path through loss, faith, and the flicker of hope that never dies.
The storm had finally passed, but its fury still lingered in the air, heavy, humid, and thick with the smell of wet earth and broken timber. Streets that were once alive with laughter and the sound of children running barefoot were now buried under layers of mud and fallen branches. Roofs had been torn apart as if by monstrous hands. Walls stood cracked and trembling, and electricity lines hung low, hissing softly in the wind like wounded serpents. The small coastal town that Tieu called home was now unrecognizable, a haunting silhouette of its former peace. Amid the wreckage, people began to move again. The old men picked up shattered wood to rebuild their fences. Mothers swept debris from their doorways while whispering silent prayers, and children searched for their toys beneath the wrecks of what once were homes. Life, though broken, was trying to return, piece by fragile piece. But among the chaos and the smell of salt and rain, one figure stood still. Tieu, drenched from head to toe, clutched the hem of her tattered coat and stared down the road as though it held all the answers she sought. Her lips were pale, her hands trembling, not from the cold, but from the gnawing fear that had rooted deep inside her since the storm began. Truong was gone. The night the storm roared through the village, he had gone out to help evacuate the northern quarter, the area closest to the sea. "I'll be back before dawn," he'd said with that soft, reassuring smile of his, the one that always managed to calm her. But dawn had come and gone, and so had the day after. There had been no word, no message, not even a trace of him, only silence, the cruel, endless silence that came after the storm's scream. As the villagers gathered to clean what remained of their homes, Tieu found herself unable to join them. Each sound, the clatter of hammers, the murmur of rebuilding, seemed distant, swallowed by the rush of her own heartbeat. She wandered aimlessly through the ruins, calling his name under her breath as if the mere whisper might bring him back. The wind tugged at her wet hair, carrying her voice away before it could reach anyone. She passed the old market, now nothing more than splinters and overturned stalls. A woman, her face streaked with mud, paused to hand Tieu a small loaf of bread. "You should eat something, child," the woman said gently. But Tieu shook her head, forcing a weak smile before continuing her way down the road. The bread felt too heavy, her throat too tight. She wasn't hungry, not for food at least. She was starving for news. The path toward the shoreline was a graveyard of memories. Fishing nets tangled in the branches of fallen trees, boats shattered against the rocks, clothes from unknown owners fluttering like lost flags in the wind. Tieu walked barefoot through the shallow puddles, every step leaving a muddy imprint that the waves would soon erase. Her heart throbbed with a mixture of hope and dread. Hope that she might find a clue, and dread that she might find what she feared most. But through all the devastation, there was something achingly beautiful in the way the sun began to pierce through the clouds. Light spilled across the wrecked landscape, glinting on the fragments of glass, the puddles, the tears on her cheeks. For a fleeting moment, Tieu felt as if the world itself was trying to rise again, urging her to keep moving, to not give up. "Truong, where are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The wind carried no answer. Only the faint rustle of leaves and the distant crash of waves replied. But even in that emptiness, Tieu took her first true step forward, into the long, uncertain search that would test both her strength and her heart.
Days blurred into one another like streaks of gray across a soaked canvas. Tieu had lost count of how many mornings she had woken to the sound of distant hammers rebuilding roofs, and how many nights she had fallen asleep beneath the cold hum of rain. Every sunrise brought her back to the same ache, the same question that gnawed at her heart. Where was Truong? She had followed every rumor, every whisper, every uncertain direction given by kind strangers who thought they might have seen a man like him. None of them led to anything but emptiness. Her body grew weaker with each passing day. Food was scarce, the storm had swept away most of the supplies. Sometimes she would chew on a piece of dry cassava someone shared out of pity, but even that felt like stone in her mouth. Her stomach protested, twisting painfully, yet she pushed on. The thought of stopping frightened her more than the hunger. Because if she stopped, even for a day, the hope that kept her moving might fade, and she could not let that happen. The world around her was both cruel and kind in its ruin. Along the broken highway, people she met would offer her a sip of water, a place to rest, or a few words of comfort. In their eyes, she saw reflections of her own pain, each person searching for someone they might never see again. One old fisherman, his arm in a sling, told her that the sea had swallowed many, but sometimes it also gave back what it took. That small spark of belief was enough to keep her walking, even when her legs trembled and her shoes had long since fallen apart. There were moments when exhaustion conquered her will. On the third day, the road stretched endlessly ahead and her vision began to blur. She stumbled through the mud, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The sky above was a dull white, heavy with the promise of more rain. She could barely lift her feet. When her knees finally buckled, she fell face first into the cold, wet ground. The world around her dissolved into a blur of water and earth. Her lips trembled and her tears mixed with the rain. For a moment, she wanted to close her eyes and let the storm inside her finally quiet. But then, like an echo from the past, she remembered the night before Truong left. The way he had smiled and brushed the hair from her face, his hands warm despite the coming storm. "If anything happens, you must stay strong, Nu. Promise me you'll keep going." Those words burned through her fog of weakness like a match in the dark. With trembling arms, she pushed herself up. The rain had started again, cold needles against her skin. Her breath was shallow, but her heart beat louder, steadier. She rose to her feet, each movement slow, deliberate, as though defying the weight of despair pressing her down. Somewhere ahead, she told herself, he was waiting. Somewhere, beyond the flooded fields and shattered trees, Truong was still alive. He had to be. She followed a narrow path leading through the remnants of what had once been a rice field. The air smelled of decay and salt, yet there was life struggling beneath it, a few green shoots piercing through the mud, daring to live again. It gave her strength. Every step she took felt like a conversation with the earth. Don't stop. Don't give up. As night descended, Tieu found shelter under a half-collapsed hut by the roadside. She huddled against the broken wall, shivering in her soaked clothes. The darkness was thick and alive with the sound of crickets and the distant rumble of thunder. She hugged her knees and whispered his name again, Truong, her voice a fragile thread of hope in the emptiness. Sleep came and went in fragments, and when dawn returned, the first light fell across her tired face. She opened her eyes to a world still bruised but no longer lifeless. The sky, though gray, carried a hint of blue. Tieu stood slowly, brushing dirt from her palms. She could feel the hunger biting at her again.
But this time, it felt almost familiar, like a companion she had learned to live with. She took a deep breath, looked at the road ahead, and began walking once more. Each step echoed her unspoken vow. She would keep searching, no matter how long it took, no matter how far she had to go, until she found Truong or until her heart gave out trying.
By the time Tieu returned home, the village had begun to resemble itself again. Not whole, not healed, but breathing. The roofs were patched with tin sheets but glimmered weakly under the afternoon light, and the air carried the faint rhythm of hammers and laughter. It should have felt like relief, but to her, it only deepened the silence within. Every familiar face she passed offered her the same sympathetic look, the same question they dared not speak aloud. Did she find him? And each time she answered with the same quiet shake of her head. The house she and Truong had shared was now half ruined. The front wall had collapsed, letting sunlight flood into what used to be their living room. Dust motes danced in the air, settling on the fragments of a once simple life. A cracked teacup, a framed photograph lying face down, the corner of his blue shirt caught beneath a fallen beam. Tieu knelt, touching the fabric gently, as though it could still carry his warmth. For a long moment, she stayed like that, her heart thudding softly in the hush of the empty room. When the tears came, they came quietly, not as a storm, but as a steady rain that refused to stop. She wasn't sure how long she sat there, only that the sky outside began to fade into dusk. The cicadas started their song again, the kind of mournful hum that fills the spaces between memories. She whispered his name, once, twice, and let her voice disappear into the hollow air. Truong, where are you? Then suddenly, her phone, that small, almost forgotten piece of her world, vibrated weakly on the floor. For a second, she didn't move. The sound was so unexpected that it felt unreal, like something imagined by a starving mind. When it came again, she reached for it with trembling hands. The screen flickered, dim and cracked, but the call was real. Unknown number. Her heart stuttered. She pressed the green icon and lifted it to her ear. "Hello?" Her voice broke into the silence. At first, there was only static, the low hiss of distance. Then, faintly, a man's voice emerged. "Is this Tieu?" "Yes. Yes, I am," she breathed. I think I saw him, the man you've been looking for, a few days ago, before the storm hit hard." Her heart stopped. "You saw Truong? Where?" The man hesitated, his tone uncertain. "Near the western coast, by the bridge that collapsed. He was helping to move people. Then the waves came fast. I lost sight of him after that. I'm sorry. I don't know if he made it." The words struck her like wind through broken glass. Hope and despair clashed in her chest until she could hardly breathe. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She wanted to ask more. Was he hurt? Was he alone? Did he call her name? But the line was already fading, the signal weakening under the broken network. The last thing she heard before it went dead was a soft, distant echo. "I hope you find him." Silence fell again. But it was no longer the heavy silence of loss. It was charged, trembling, alive. Tieu stared at the phone in her hand, her pulse quickening. He had been seen. He was alive, at least then. That meant there was still a chance, however small, however fragile, that he still was. She stood slowly, her knees weak but steady. Outside, the last traces of sunlight spilled over the wrecked roofs, painting everything in gold. The air smelled of salt and new beginnings. Tieu wiped her tears, squared her shoulders, and stepped out into the open. The road ahead stretched far and uncertain, but she no longer saw it as an enemy. It was a path, the same one she and Truong had walked so many times before, hand in hand, back when the world was whole. And now she would walk it again, this time alone, but guided by the faint, stubborn flame that refused to die inside her. As the wind swept through the trees, she whispered once last time, her voice carried gently across the dusk. "Wait for me, Truong. I'm coming."
Hello, Xin chào tất cả các khán giả của kênh Lý Tử Linda Review. Vậy là trong tập phim ngày hôm nay của chúng ta thì Lý tiểu nữ đã lên đường đi tìm Truong sau cơn bão kinh hoàng đổ bộ tại nơi mà cả Trường và tiểu nữ đang sống, và liệu rằng Trường có còn sống hay không. Trong khi đó tiểu nữ đang đi tìm anh đến mức cạn kiệt sức lực. Cô chỉ biết bật khóc khi không nhận được tin tức gì về anh. Mọi tình tiết hấp dẫn sẽ được kể ở các câu chuyện tiếp theo. Các bạn hãy nhớ bấm vào nút đăng ký kênh để nhận được thông báo mới nhất về tập phim sẽ được phát sóng hàng ngày trên kênh nha. Cảm ơn các bạn rất nhiều. Xin chào và hẹn gặp lại. Bye bye.